Okay, hello everyone. Let's check the connection first. If you could hear me, please type 1 in the comment section. Okay, they can hear us very, very well. Very good. So Professor Lantolf, I will share the screen first, and we'll introduce you first, and then we'll start the conversation. Could you stop sharing for a while?
Oh, right, yeah.
Okay. Okay. So everyone, could you see my screen? So right now the screen shows welcome Professor Lantolf. I have to confirm at every step, otherwise we're just talking to ourselves.
Yeah.
Okay, good. They say they could see the screen. Okay, now let's get started. So hello everyone, and good morning, good evening, and good afternoon. Welcome to The Way of Reading, episode 286. And today, as you can see, we have a special guest. I'm so thrilled to be joined by Professor James Lantolf, who is a Greer Professor Emeritus of Language Acquisition and Applied Linguistics at Penn State University. So Professor Lantolf is, without exaggeration, one of the most influential figures in second language acquisition. He is a scholar who brought Vygotskian sociocultural theory into mainstream SLA, and in doing so, transformed how we think about language learning. At Penn State, he directed the Center for Language Acquisition for nearly 2 decades, and led the federally funded Cowper Center for 20 years. He also served as a Yangtze River scholar at Xi'an Jiaotong University, reflecting his deep ties to the global research community. Now his work centers on, the previous slide. Okay, should be this slide, sorry. Now his work centers on 3 interconnected areas, sociocultural theory and SLA, applying Vygotskian's idea about mediation and the zone of proximal development to language learning, and concept-based language instruction, which is a pedagogical approach where learners engage with scientific concept behind the language, not just rules, and dynamic assessment, an approach that merges teaching and testing to review what the learners are capable of becoming. So here are a few highlights from a remarkable career: the AAAL Distinguished Scholarship and Service Award in 2016, which is the highest honor in applied linguistics; the MLA Mildenberg Prize in 2014 for his book on sociocultural pedagogy, and he served as the president of the AAAL in 2005. He also founded the journal Language and Sociocultural Theory and edited it for a decade. So his publications have no doubt defined the field, from the groundbreaking 1994 version on Vygotskian approaches to the 2000 collection that became a graduate level essential reading, to the prize-winning 2014 book Bridging Theory and Classroom Practice, and the comprehensive 2018 Routledge Handbook. And most recently, he guest-edited special issues on sociocultural research in East Asia. So a career spanning decades, a body of work that reshaped an entire field, and we are so fortunate to have him right here with us today. So Professor Lantolf, a very welcome to The Way of Reading.
Chan, thank you so much for that wonderful introduction. I very much appreciate it, and I'm really glad to participate. And I've been looking forward to this event for some time since we talked about it at AAAL. And I look forward to a really interesting conversation.
Okay, before we begin, let me say a few words about how today's conversation would go. I've prepared 15 questions across 5 categories, from the current state of the field to SCT in practice to the relationship between the generative AI and SCT, and to finally to career advice. But this is a live show, and this is a conversation, not an interrogation. The audience is welcome to send in questions at any time. I'll pass them along to Professor Lantolf as they come in, and we won't necessarily follow the question list rigidly. So please, everybody, don't be shy. Now, let's get started. Let me first show this paper commentary. Last December, in this program, we read this commentary of yours from the Modern Language Journal, talking about the current crisis in the second language acquisition and second language teaching. So how about we begin the question from a topic related to this. So the first question is, you talk about your diagnose SLA and SLT as being in a state of crisis, but not a Kulian revolution, but something more akin to the chronic crisis in psychology. So the question is, how does this crisis manifest concretely in the fields of journals, graduate curricula, and conference programming? Are there specific symptoms that graduate students should be able to recognize? Professor Lantolf?
Yes, thank you very much. That's a great question. Let me first say that the reason why we think it's not a Kuhnian crisis is that a Kuhnian crisis would, by implication, mean that there's already a paradigm at work within the field.
Yes.
And there's more or less a unified theory on second language acquisition that is being questioned because the evidence is showing that the theory is not able to account for a significant amount of new data that's being uncovered. And that leads to questioning the theory, eventually to a revolution, and then the establishment of a new theory. That's not the case in the field of second language acquisition.
Yeah.
If we can share screen now, I want to show.
No problem.
Okay.
I'll pass the host to you so you can share the screen.
Okay, right.
Now, Professor Lantolf, you are the host. You can share the screen now.
Okay. So let me show you this. I assume you can see this diagram.
Yes, we can see this.
Okay, so this is, I think, why there's a crisis in the field, but it's a very different kind of crisis, and it's one that parallels what has been going on in psychology almost from the beginning, when in the 19th century, when psychology broke away from philosophy. And there are different dimensions to the crisis. If you look at this horizontal line across here, where you see my cursor moving, you can see that there are numerous theories of second language acquisition represented here. Information processing, input processing, skill acquisition theory, I won't name all of them, neurocognitive theory, UG, all the way over to CDST and sociocultural theory. So there are multiple theories, and that's one of the biggest problems that I think we have in the field, because each one of these theories tends to operate in its own little silo, its own little dominion, and doesn't pay much attention to what's going on in other theories. So that's one of the significant problems. Related to this, which we pointed out in our synergies paper, is there isn't an agreed upon theory of language. So we're talking about second language acquisition, but we don't agree on what language is. Is it a UG kind of language? Is it the way cognitive linguistics define language or systemic functional linguistics defines language, right? So we're talking about something that we don't even agree on as to what it is. Yet we're talking about acquiring this thing, whatever that is, right? And there doesn't seem to be interest in overcoming that obstacle. At the recent AAAL meeting, we had a special session on the crisis, and when we raised the issue of language, the people supporting the Synergy's position were very happy to say that language can be whatever you want it to be. And that's not how science works. Science is not about deciding what you want according to your taste. That's art. That's art. And if second language acquisition is about art, then it doesn't matter. Then we can do whatever we want to do, and whatever our taste is, that's what we work on. And so that to me is a significant issue as to whether or not we're doing science or whether we're doing art. And if we're doing art, then okay, do whatever you want. It's fine. Okay, so that's a real problem that has to be solved, and there doesn't seem to be much interest in solving it. The other topic that I think is important, which is related to the different theories, is that there's a cognitive orientation among the researchers, which is itself at odds. So there are some that think in a linear kind of way, largely the people that are doing quantitative research.
Corpus linguistics.
Well, corpus linguistics, but also quantitative research. So you think of in terms of, what are the dependent and the independent variables that we're working with, right? Whereas systems approaches, like CDST or sociocultural theory, thinks in terms of a holistic system. And you can't separate the system without destroying the very thing you're trying to study. So that's a major distinction within the field that I think needs to be resolved. And what are the consequences of thinking systematically versus thinking in a linear kind of way? And that affects the relationship between research and teaching, because each one of these theories says something different to teachers. And how do teachers decide? Some theories say you don't have to worry about explaining language to students. All you have to do is provide a lot of exposure, and that's good enough, and they'll get it. And so wasting your time explaining really abstract and complex concepts isn't going to work. And yet there are other theories, like sociocultural theory, that says, no, you have to explain really complex things to people, like English articles, English prepositions, Chinese word order, which are not easy to get in short periods of time just from input alone. So that's another problem.
Yes.
And so, and then we have this is a really interesting one that I just uncovered recently in the project that we're working on. And that is, the researchers that are serious about doing quantitative research in statistical analysis have argued in several of their recent papers, I think largely led by people like Luke Plonsky and John Norris and a few others, that a lot of the research that has been quantitative in nature has been flawed, either in the research design or in the way statistics are used. Now, if that's the case, there's a problem with what the current status of the field is in terms of what we know. So if the research that's been going on for the past 40 or 50 years is flawed, how can we make progress?
I completely agree with you.
Well,
I have mentioned this several times in these live streams about how linguistics don't even have a shared definition of language, and they don't have a shared value on how the research should be conducted.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at the hard sciences, they don't like having multiple theories.
No.
They make minimal use of statistics. So, one of the big debates that's going on now in physics is how do we bring together relativity theory of Einstein and quantum theory of Niels
Yes.
Bohr and Heisenberg?
Yeah.
How do we bring those together,
Yeah.
right? And that's, for them, a crucial problem that has to be
Yes.
overcome, right? And if we look at, let me show you this next slide. This is based, on a paper that was written by Ronald Warhaw, who was a Canadian applied linguist, on the 50th anniversary of the journal Language Learning in 1998. And one of the things he says is that the field, this I think captures the whole notion of crisis. He says the field is forever doomed to discuss promises and problems. And as he points out a little bit further down on the page, right, we see that the research that we take is very much piecemeal and fragmented because of these multiple theories, right? And we never work on a problem long enough to solve it. He says, we work on problems, we need to spend at least a couple of generations, which is what the hard sciences do, trying to solve problems and puzzles. We don't do that. We work on something for a couple of weeks or a couple of months or even a year or two, and then we move on to something else, without ever really solving the problem.
No.
So if that's the case that characterizes the field, how can we not be in a state of crisis?
Yeah.
Right.
So I have a follow-up questions on
Yes.
this. Do you think this is a norm, something that characteristic of social sciences, or is it possible that we achieve the same standard as natural sciences? So I remember Bernstein. Sorry, you continue.
Go ahead. No, go ahead. Go ahead.
Bernstein has modeled the different types of sciences with metaphors like he describes social sciences as warring triangles. So each series they claim their own field, but the natural sciences, particularly like physics, is a pyramid model. So they all work on the same foundation and build the pyramid up. But in social sciences, like numerous periods, they each occupy different location.
Yes.
So is it a norm, or is it possible we can achieve that kind of unity?
Yeah, that's a really good question. If you look at a department of psychology, like at Penn State, right, which is a huge department, you have probably 10 or 12 different kinds of psychology being practiced, and they can't talk to each other. So the clinical psychologists have nothing in common with the cognitive psychologists, who have nothing in common with the social psychologists, who have nothing in common with the developmental psychologists, right? So you're right, they all are within their little triangles or silos, as we like to call them, right? And so you get these sort of micro sciences. But the problem is, how do you make progress? What is the goal of psychology? The goal of psychology is to try to understand the human mind, right?
Yes.
Where does it come from? How does it function? How is it different from other species, right? And if you go back to the beginning of psychology, all the way back to Wilhelm Wundt's lab in Leipzig, Germany, he immediately understood that there was a crisis because he saw that certain kind of psychological research, namely what we call behaviorism, was amenable to certain kinds of research through controlled experiments. And he argued that if you want to study things like meaning, you couldn't do experimental research. You had to do what became anthropology, for example, right? Or linguistics eventually. But Vygotsky, before he even began to develop his theory, he understood that you had to first overcome this crisis. You had to find a way of developing unified theory that would span all of these various ways of understanding the human mind. So the theory that he was working on was a theory that applied to cognitive science, that applied to, and his colleague Luria did work on the neuroscience side of things, right? He understood that the theory also had to apply to developmental psychology. He understood that the theory also had to apply to industrial psychology, to educational psychology, right? So what he was arguing for from the very beginning
Yes.
was that you needed a unified theory, and you could have a pyramid kind of model, but because of and other psychologists also were writing about the crisis, and there are psychologists that are still writing about the crisis in psychology, which is the same problem. Multiple approaches, multiple theories, and in fact, psychology, you could argue, is almost a theoryless field, where what matters is your method. It's all about method. So what unifies psychology, and I'm afraid this applies to SLA, the only unifying force within SLA is methods. And so you find, and this goes to the part of your question that deals with graduate programs and graduate students. What is required in most graduate programs is courses on methods. And you find method book after method book after method book being published. I counted at this year's AAAL, Jan Benjamins has put out 10 new methods books in the past year.
But no methodology teaching taught.
No theory.
Yeah.
Nothing on theory, right? And what counts as theory in second language acquisition is just a survey of all of these theories here. That's how theory is treated. But there's no attempt to help students develop the capacity to think theoretically. We teach them to think methodologically in terms of methods. And people are very good technicians, but they don't ask really interesting questions. And the problem then becomes we study only what we have methods to study. And that's not how things should work. The one argument that Vygotsky made was you have to ask really hard and interesting questions, and then you have to develop the method to answer those questions. So it's not about a toolkit approach to methods, which is, I think, pretty much what the field has developed and what it offers to grad students, right? So you get grad students and people in the field who are really good technicians. And they do really complex statistical manipulations.
Yeah, more complex than necessary sometimes.
Than necessary, right? And the problem is that this linear way of thinking in terms of variables is not going to get you at the underlying processes that are at work, right? So what you have to be able to do is to develop methods that get to the underlying hidden aspects of the acquisition process, which is what physics and biology and chemistry has been doing in their particular fields for a long time. Right?
So in your commentary, you distinguish between methods and methodology. So could you say a few words about their difference?
Yeah. So method is about techniques and procedures, right? But methodology is basically a theory of how you should be thinking about your object of study. Are you going to think in terms of linear models or systems models, right? And this is going to determine the kinds of techniques and methods that you use, right? So methodology is different from methods, but in our field we've sort of collapsed the two, and they're sort of synonymous. They both mean the same thing, but according to other people in psychology, there's a difference between methodology, which is your cognitive orientation to what it is you're trying to study, how you think. Do you think dialectically, or do you think metaphysically, for example? Right? Are things separated? Right? Like in linear thinking, right? So you have an independent and a dependent variable. They're separated. And then they bump up against each other. But in systems thinking, they're not separated. So the relationship between people and the world in which they live is inseparable, right? And if that's your thinking, then the way you do research is going to be different from if you think the world is made up of independent entities and individuals are separate from the context in which they live.
So we have a comment from the audience. It says, the problem is if we don't know how to approach it, we don't know what question to ask. I think it's right to the point. So talking about the graduate students, so given that, so many of the questions will be asked from the perspective of graduate students and early career researchers because the majority of our audience will be them. So most of the graduate students are trained within a single theoretical tradition and may never encounter the crisis as you described. So how can they develop the meta-theoretical awareness needed to see beyond their own framework?
Yeah, I mean, that's basically the key question, right? And so what happens as a consequence is you get these two things showing up, right? You do 2-hour studies or 2-week studies, and then you publish it. And because of the pressures that we're under now to publish, what he describes as trivial papers, right? You're not going to be able to solve problems because you're not working on the problem long enough. And I lay the blame on the graduate programs. It's not the students' fault. It's the graduate programs who treat things in terms of these little triangles. So if you go to graduate school X, you're going to learn this triangle. If you go to graduate school Y, you're going to learn the other triangle, right?
Yes.
And you're never going to have the opportunity to read what's going on in these other triangles, right? So one of the things that you need to do is you need to understand what's going on across this domain, right?
Yes.
But the problem is because we have the pressure to publish, you sort of don't have time to do that, right? And so what's valued is the amount of research that you crank out, not the quality of the research that you produce. And the quality of research depends on your ability to think and ask interesting questions, right? But that means you have to know how to think theoretically, not in terms of methods and procedures, but in terms of pondering what are really interesting and hard questions.
Yes.
And we don't provide students with that opportunity in graduate programs because they're spending most of their time taking methods courses.
Yes, just as you said, I have this observation that some the early career researchers and also the graduate students, they tend to, just change the variable when they try to do research. They usually change the independent variable to see whether this theory applied to that group of people, then they change to another group of people, and then they write a paper and publish. So that's all. That's all they did.
So we're producing a lot of research, but it's as Wardhaus says, it's trivial. A lot of it's trivial. And then the only way we have to unify this research is meta-analysis, right? But how do you, and this to me is another interesting problem, how do you, in a meta-analysis, unify the findings from all of these theories that have different theoretical frameworks? How do you bring them all together? Right?
This is actually the question number 2, the second question. So, as you mentioned in your commentary, that some researchers, they propose a synergy approach to bring all the theory together, but you do not agree with this because you argue that this approach may sidestep fundamental disagreements and creates an appearance of harmony without shared values. So what would be a more honest, more productive form of cross-theoretical dialogue actually look like in practice? I think we have to first of all admit that and accept the fact that we have to find a way of overcoming all of these theoretical differences, right? We need to try to develop some sort of meta theory, right? Which can
bring together the findings from. I'm not saying that we shouldn't be doing neurocognitive research. We should be, right? We should be doing work on interaction. We should be. But how do we bring these two strands of research together in a unified way, right? And one of the problems is that we don't spend enough time focusing on what's going on in these other worlds, these other ways of thinking, these other methodologies, these
we
other
simply don't have time to do that.
Yeah, that's the problem, right? We don't have time to do that because we have to publish trivial papers. Right? We have to spend a lot of time publishing trivial papers.
Yes.
That's a fundamental problem, it seems to me. So in terms of the synergy, how do you bring together somebody who's a UG person with a cognitive linguistics person? They're completely incommensurable, right? One has the assumption that language is innate, right? And the other one has the assumption that it's all about, there's no underlying structure. It's all surface, right? And there's no separate component there's no separate cognitive component for language. How do you bring these two things together, right?
There are forever corroding.
Well, which one of them is right? They can't both be right, it seems to me, right? So one of the ways that the field is doing that is just ignoring the problem. We just turn our backs on it.
So at the beginning of nearly every cognitive linguistic book, there's a criticism of the UG. Usually books begins with a criticism of UG.
That's right. Yeah, and the criticisms, I think, a lot of them are legitimate. But what you notice is that the UG people just ignore it. They don't pay any attention.
No, they never answer. They never reply.
No,
and never respond.
No, I think if you look at Lakoff and Johnson's book on philosophy in the flesh, that was published 20 years ago, there's really sharp and insightful criticisms of the UG paradigm, but the UG people never responded. Just ignore it. And they continue to work on their little silo or their little triangle, right? So I don't see how we make progress. Yet, it's interesting that Rod Ellis, he's published these two thick books on the study of second language acquisition, right? One in 1994, the second one in 2008. And one of the things he says in the 2008 book is that when he published the first edition, he said, by the time he finished the second one, he was expecting that there would be consensus in the field.
So he's disappointed.
He says, I'm completely disappointed because there's even less agreement now than there was when I wrote my first volume in 1994. There's less agreement across the field. There's more disagreement. There's less consensus. We don't have any kind of unity in the field. So we've gotten further and further apart as time has gone on, rather than closer and closer together.
So it seems to me something seemed very interesting to me. So I have seen many sharp exchanges happening during the 1990s and the early 2000s. Like scholars, they combat each other very fiercely. But now the field seems to have come to a completely opposite direction. Now we don't talk to each other anymore. We politely isolate ourselves. So is this an improvement or is
no? How can that
become worse?
Yeah, I think the problem with the 1990s debates were that they were not serious scientific debates. They were a lot of ad hominem, attacking the person. I mean, I was attacked. You know that by Kevin Gregg.
I read it. I read it.
Yeah, and that's not how science makes progress.
Yeah.
And so, by these vicious ad hominem debates, you're not going to make progress. And by not talking to each other, you're not going to make progress, right? One of the things that was said to me when we were proposing this session at AAAL on the synergies problem was that the synergies people refused to have any kind of confrontational debate. If we were going to be confrontational and challenge their ideas, then they weren't interested in having this conversation. So if that's the orientation, then I don't see how we're ever going to make progress. What has to happen is I think there has to be continuous, what we might call adversarial dialogue.
Yes.
Right? Dialogue. Not confrontation in the sense of, attacking each other.
So this comes to our question number 3, adversarial collaboration.
Yeah.
So, and you mentioned the example, how you compare your own theory as the SCT with processability theory.
Yes.
So we learn from the psychologists, we do experiments. We design experiments to test each other's theory, and we dedicated to some third-party group to do the experiment who is neutral on the ground. So could you say a few words about what adversarial collaboration entails?
Yeah, well, it entails, first of all, bringing together at least 2 theories that have what look like incommensurable viewpoints, right? And comparing the theories on a sequence of experiments that will test each theory, and it's agreed upon by the proponents of each theory. You have to be willing, the key thing is you have to be willing to give up your theoretical perspective in the face of counter evidence, right? That would be a Kuhnian type of revolution, right? And you have to be willing to do that. Now, the problem is that a lot of people are not willing to do that because you've invested perhaps a good deal of your life in a particular theory. But if we're ever going to make progress, we have to be willing to take the risk, right? Now, I would say that and then you need a team of neutral researchers evaluating the outcome of the finding, which is what was done in neuroscience in terms of the relationship between which areas of the brain seem to control consciousness, right? And the evidence seemed to support one theory over the other, as determined by a neutral team of scientists. That is a good thing.
Is it possible to find a neutral team in linguistics to do the research? Yeah,
I think so. I think you can, if you design the study right, I think you can find people who can look at the evidence that's coming out of the experiment, and who aren't vested in either one of the theories. So there are a lot of people who are not vested in sociocultural theory or in processability theory, right? But who would be able to interpret the data that shows, there's more evidence for this theory than for that theory. I think that shouldn't be a problem.
But if the results,
the problem is to get the adversaries to agree to do the project. Right?
So have you found the researchers from other fields who agree to do this?
We had some interest from Manfred Pienemann's group on processability theory, which I think was a really interesting comparison, because when you look at SCT and processability theory, they say completely opposite things about developmental sequences, right? So processability theory says learners will progress from one stage to the next only if they're developmentally ready. Sociocultural theory says you make them developmentally ready by teaching them, right? So one puts development ahead, and the other one puts development behind, and so that I thought would be a really good comparison. But I've had discussions with Mumford's team, and right now it looks as if they're not that interested in pursuing. But we are going to pursue a project, by the way, that we're just starting, that tests both hypotheses using Chinese word order, particularly the ba constructions.
So currently, the both claims from the processability theory and the SCT, both claims seems to be very strong. But what if the results were mixed? So now instruction altered the sequence for some structures but no others. So how would that be interpreted?
Right. So I can tell you so far what we know. Right. So the first study we did was one of my grad students, Xian Zhang, who's now teaching in Texas, and he did it. His dissertation was on Chinese topicalization, right? Moving adverbs and objects to first position, right? And it showed that through teaching, you could skip stages, right? Which is supposedly can't happen in processability theory. You have to go stage 1, 2, 3, and 4. He showed that you could go from stage 1 to stage 3, or you could get stage 3 and 4 together, right, with the right kind of teaching. The response from the PT people was, well, the structures that you were looking at, first of all, were not really syntactic. They were pragmatic discourse features, and maybe native speakers wouldn't behave the same way as the learners behave. And they also said that the structures were too easy. Okay? So that's why we're moving on to Bach instruction, which is more complex. And we're going to have native speaker controls in the study to compare. Okay? Because it's pragmatic. It's about pragmatic word order, right? And so we'll see. But it's a more complex structure, and it's like a stage 5 instead of a stage 3 structure. So now, what I want to say is the following. What could happen, what could come out of this, would be that if you don't teach, the learners might follow Pieneman's sequence. But if you teach, they might be able to skip levels, right? So what that would show is that the teachability part of the processability theory would have to be modified. They'd have to change it. Because right now what they're saying is teaching is not going to affect the development. Teaching has no effect on the developmental sequence. It can only make it go faster or slower, but you can't skip. There's no qualitative difference. What we're saying is teaching will make that difference. So it's possible that one part of processability theory could still be sustained, and that is the part where there's no intervention. But where there is intervention, you could get what we're predicting, which would be, skipping levels.
It seems to me that the processability theory sounds very similar to Piaget's staged development theory, which is completely opposite to Vygotsky's theory.
That's right. Yes, we pointed that out in one of our early papers, and Pieneman, it was clear to us that it was Piagetian all the way through. And Pieneman sort of didn't agree with us, but I still think what you said is correct. It's really Piagetian. I think most of the theories of SLA are largely Piagetian in terms of the relationship between development and instruction.
Now let's move on to another topic, dynamic assessments. This is another very debated topic, because the dynamic assessment is drastically different from a traditional method. It fuses instruction and assessment into a single activity. We actually, in this program, we once read an article about dynamic assessment. So this is a radical departure from a conventional testing. So could you walk us through how a dynamic assessment session work in a real classroom and explain what it reveals about a learner that a traditional test cannot?
Yeah, okay. Basically, what dynamic assessment is all about, it's about the zone of proximal development. Right?
Yes.
And the zone of proximal development basically is about what we were just talking about, that teaching will project a different future for an individual than if you leave them to their own devices. So if they function independently, they will get a different outcome than if they function collaboratively with somebody else. But there's a deeper principle at work here, and the principle is that what Vygotsky calls sociogenesis of development, namely that humans and their environment, their world, are inseparable, so that the source of all development is social. You look not inside the person, but outside the person. And so dynamic assessment in the zone of proximal development is looking at the source of development as outside of the individual, namely other people. Right? That's the fundamental principle that's operating there, right? And so what it's saying is that if you only look at independent performance, you're looking at the past, you're looking at the history, right? And you're not getting a full picture of the student's development unless you look at also their potential development, their future development. And you can have people with the same past with different futures, right? And you can have people with different past and the same future, right? So what dynamic assessment is about, it's that, and it's what Vygotsky's experiments were all about, right? Vygotsky's experiments were essentially teaching experiments, right? You provide people with the task that they can't do, and then you give them help, mediation, to do it, and you look at how they use that mediation, which will tell you what their real capacities are like, right? Okay, whether they can appropriate that mediation or whether they can't, right? Okay, that's the fundamental basis of. So what it does is it brings the classroom and the experimental laboratory together as a unity. And so what that means is that teaching is a kind of experiment, and that experiments are a kind of teaching. It doesn't make this distinction between basic research and applied research. They're basically unified, right? So now, in the classrooms, one of the questions you asked, I think, was that in China, for example, you have huge classes, and it's how do you implement something like dynamic assessment or the zone of proximal development in the same class? One of the recommendations that Vygotsky makes in one of his papers is a very interesting one, which is instead of grouping people on the basis of placement tests that are traditionally given based on the past, you group them according to their zone of proximal development. So you put students together who have a large zone of proximal development, and you put students together who have a small zone of proximal development, which means you need to engage in different kinds of teaching for these two groups because the mediation needs to be different. So it would argue you could still have large classes, but the way you group people within classes would be different.
Why not put people with different ZPD together so that they could learn from each other?
Yeah, the problem with that is students don't know how to mediate each other.
That's a problem.
One of the problems, and there's been a couple of papers written on this, about peer mediation, right? Peer mediation usually doesn't work very well because there's a tendency on the part of the person that knows how to do something to do the problem for the other person rather than just to give them clues and hints, right? It takes a special kind, and teachers are not necessarily good at that either. You have to train people how to do this. There's a research institute in Israel called the Feuerstein Institute, which trains peers how to do mediation. There was a researcher in China at Luoyang University who was doing some of this approach with teaching children in middle school how to mediate each other in English language reading classes, right? So I think it's possible, but you just can't put peers together and say, okay, you help the other person, because they don't know how to do that in a way that promotes development, right? So giving the person the answer is not promoting development. Pushing them to try to solve the problem themselves is the way you have to mediate, right? And that takes a special kind of preparation.
But the thing that in order for In order to put students with the same ZPT together, we need to first know their ZPT individually.
Yes.
And the mediator, I think, must be very highly skilled at reading the learner's ZPT and in real time. But how does a teacher, develop this skill?
Yeah. Again, the problem goes to teacher education programs, right?
Uh-huh.
I think that's one of the big problems that we have at least in my experience in the North American scene. I used to be a high school teacher of Spanish, and we were never trained really how to not just do work in the zone of proximal development, but we were never really trained appropriately in our knowledge of the language that we were trying to teach, right? So that's a real problem. The kind of knowledge that teachers have of the language they're teaching is the first problem that has to be overcome. The second problem is, how do you engage learners in things like, dynamic assessment? Now, one of the things that I think Matt Poner has been working on with some of his colleagues in Finland is a computerized dynamic assessment. And that could be used as a placement test, right? Particularly using AI as a way of providing mediation. It remains to be seen how effective AI might be in providing mediation, but I know they're working on this problem, and I think it's an interesting possibility. Yeah.
Yeah, I've made 2 apps based on SCT and the ZPT theory. Let me show you one of them. It's an app to help students develop their writing skills. Now I will share the screen for a short while. Okay. Just a moment. Okay. So could you see my screen, Professor Lantolf?
Yes.
So here's a web page that helps students develop their IELTS writing. Let's click in any one of them.
Yeah.
So here's a development learning center. There's a development center. So as you can see from the screen, we classified the different skills, the 5 major skills, and then we identified the 15 sub-skills from each of them. So, and then we designed a ZPD style diagram. So in the middle, it's the skills that the students have already mastered, and and the second circle is the ZPD. So the skills that students are ready to learn, ready to develop. Yeah. And then the outer circle is skills that currently students are not able to learn. So, and then we based on this, we have several agents, AI agents, to provide scaffolding to the students. So this is a SCT-driven app for writing training, help students improve their IELTS writing. So altogether, there are 75 small skills under 5 umbrella larger skill sets. And we order them by their difficulty level. But I understand that maybe order them by difficulty level may not be 100% true to the SCT. Just as you mentioned, if we instruct correctly, we may skip some those skills, and we learn the skills, higher skills before the more easier skills. So this is one of example. I made several apps based on SCT and the scaffolding and the ZPD. Okay.
So when you talk about the outer circle, where does that mean they can't do the task with any kind of mediation?
So the mediation is provided by AI.
Yeah.
So here, when you practice, for example, here, there are several agents. Now, in the middle is a writing zone. After you finish the writing, you click on submit. And then here you have the agents. We have 5 agents who each responsible for different tasks. One is examining vocabulary, one for grammar, one for logic, one for the topic achievement. So they are examining the writing, and they provide some suggestions. Now they have done the examination. Then you can click on this for the comments. So each agent give you the comment on different aspects. Yeah, and the system will record your mistakes and your achievement. So you have here in the learning center. So your top weak area, your error book, which error you tend to make most frequently, and which area you need to prove urgently. And based on all the statistics, so we summarize this into this ZPD circle. And the AI will, based on the ZPD circle, to provide the next step mediation. This will be related to the questions that will be asked later. Whether AI can serve as an effective MKO to mediate the language learning.
Yeah, I mean, that's an empirical question. I mean, I can't answer that. I know that one of Matt Poner's grad students, who's also from China, has been working on her dissertation that's doing something similar to what you're doing for English writing. It might be interesting if you two were to share your ideas with each other. Please. I will ask Matt to put you in touch with her. She's, I think, currently now working in Texas. But I think you're doing something similar. But I would want to see the kind of mediation that AI provides. Is it too helpful? Is it not helpful enough? Right? Does it adjust its mediation based on learner responsivity, for example? Because that's one of the things that humans can do, right? If the learner is not responsive, you can adjust the mediation. So I think the AI has to be able to do that. I don't know whether it can. I don't know.
With proper training, maybe a careful orchestration of the prompts, maybe AI can do this. So it's to me, it's more a technical thing, not a fundamental. So now we switch back to the questions.
Okay.
So I got. We still have half an hour ago. Maybe we need to skip some questions. Let's. How about we move to AI? Oh no, let's do not skip this concept-based language instruction. The SCOBA. This is very interesting.
Yeah.
So SCOBA, the schemas for the orienting basis of action, to replace textbook rules of thumb with coherent scientific concepts. So the question is, how does a teacher go about designing a SCOBA, and what makes a good one different from just another grammar chart?
Right. So the first answer to that is teachers have to have really deep knowledge of the language. You have to really know the language well. You have to know your subject matter very well. And SCOBAs, remember, are different from grammar charts in that grammar charts are basically focused on form, whereas SCOBAs are focused on meaning, conceptual understanding.
Let me show a SCOBA to the audience so that they understand better what we are talking about. I found here is a SCOBA teaching the concept of two.
Yeah. Yeah, I was going to show you one that I have.
Okay. Please share your
so
screen.
Let me share.
Okay.
Yeah, let me share. You have to give me permission again.
Yeah. Okay. Now you can share now.
Yeah. Okay. So here's one of my favorite. Here's one of my favorite SCOBAs. This was developed by one of my grad students, Haewon Lee, and it's for teaching English particle verbs. Right. And this is the particle verbs formed without, like pull out, take out, right? Jump out. And essentially, all the meanings that you need, that you have for out, including the metaphorical meanings, are represented in these four boxes, right? So this one here shows you that something is out of a container, right? So here's the container, here's the object. Here you select something from a group, like pick out a new shirt. This one is moving something out of a container, like take your hands out of your pocket. And this is increasing the size of something, like spreading out, or a balloon spreading out, right? That's all you need to know to capture the verb out. All verbs without. So if you look at these examples, so if you say I took the cup out of the box, you can see that it's three. If you say we fished out the ring, you can see it's two. Right? If we say we handed out the brochures, you can see it's going to be four. And if you say we picked out a name for the baby, you can see it's going to be two. So all possible meanings of any verb, whether literal or metaphorical, are captured in this scoba. Right? And what's interesting about this, it's very easy to remember it. Most students just look at this once and they understand how it works. And more importantly, is that they capture the idea that all particle verbs in English can be derived from the literal meaning of the particle. So the students in her experiment were able to take this knowledge and transfer it to other particles, like in, down, up, and so on. Right? So that's what a scoba is all about. It's about meaning. It's not about form. So this looks very different from a grammar chart. Right?
So currently, yes, you move on. You move on.
Well, what I was going to say is, to be able to do this, you have to have knowledge of the concept, right? Which means that our teacher education programs have to prepare teachers in the language instead of spending all of the time on methods and other kinds of things that are really not focused deeply on the language. And that's the key.
So pertinent question regarding this is, so currently some text-to-image models, they're so advanced. They make it very easy to make this kind of diagram. You just need some prompts, then they make this diagram for you. So you can see many this kind of resources on the social media, like in the Red Notes. The Xiaohongshu in China? It's a social media platform. Many people are sharing this kind of diagram. I have seen many of them talking about the usage of prepositions, like this one. But the problem is that not everyone have the adequate understanding of these prepositions. Some of them they prepare those materials based on their own understanding, which may not be 100% accurate.
Right. That's a problem.
Yes. So is there a authoritative resource for this kind of teaching, like a repertoire of diagrams ready for the language teachers?
There are some in some languages. I know Spanish. There are people that have been working on Spanish for quite a while. There's a person at Columbia University in New York that has a textbook on Spanish. I don't know of. I know there's a person in Italy that's been working on English, developing scobas for English, certain aspects of English. But I don't know. I can't say, go to this source and you'll find really great scobas. I think what has to happen is teachers have to experiment and see how the students respond to their scobas. Depending on, you can do more sophisticated things with more advanced students than you can with beginning students, that's for sure. But you have to see how the students respond, and then you have to be willing to modify the scoba based on the students' responsiveness to what you, if they don't understand it,
also
then you have
dynamic.
to change it. Yeah, it's dynamic. I mean, but the bottom line is the teacher has to really know the language.
Yes.
And I think that's an issue. And I think the problem comes out of the teacher education programs where we just
Yes.
don't spend enough time on deep knowledge of the language.
Yes, I work with cognitive linguistics, particularly frame semantics. I'm trying to apply
Yes.
cognitive linguistics to genre analysis. So this kind of diagram, you can frequently see them in a cognitive monograph
Yes,
or textbook.
that's right.
And also in your own paper, you mentioned that it's a good starting point to draw the concepts from cognitive linguistics or systemic functional linguistics.
Systemic functional. Yeah,
Okay.
that's what we've been doing. The problem is that sometimes the cognitive linguistics models are a little bit complex, so you have to simplify them for pedagogical purposes. But they're a really decent source of information. Yeah.
And the problem is that, following your comments, most teachers are not equipped with knowledge about cognitive linguistics. Many of them are trained with formal linguistics before they become a language teacher.
Yeah. Yeah.
So this makes these things even more difficult for them to do SCOPA.
Yeah, I mean, you're right. I mean, but I mean, sociocultural theory is a theory which puts meaning at the center of development, and cognitive linguistics puts meaning at the center of language, right? Not form. And so that's why I think the two, and systemic functional linguistics as well. And that's why I think the psychological theory and the linguistic theory fit so well together.
So
Right.
if you would need a team to build the resources for SCOPA for English, I will definitely, I'm willing to contribute to it. I'm waiting for your call. So we have
I think it's, I think somebody's going to have to lead that besides me. I'm getting, up there in age. So, but I think that's a worthwhile project to have a team of people. You could do it. I think a team of people. There are people in different parts of the world that are working on this. But if you had somebody that could put them all together, that would be great. And develop a textbook for teaching English using, SET with concept-based linguistic SCOBAs. Yeah, that would be a worthwhile
I think
project.
we can, using AI, we can accelerate the process of preparing the SCOPA material. Let me show you a project, a Claude project. Let me share my screen for a while. This time I'll make sure the audience see my screen.
Yep.
Here I have set up here we go. I have set up a project in Claude, the Anthropic AI. So this project is called SCOPA Maker. So its main purpose is to make SCOPA design based on sociocultural theory-driven second language teaching method. So here I have a big example. I asked the AI to explain in the two types of deontic modal verbs from forced dynamic theory.
Yep.
So it do the research. So this project automates the entire process of making SCOPA. It does the research by searching online. It searches for relevant information about the deontic models. Then step one, it defines the scientific concepts behind this language point, deontic model verbs. So then they found the Leonardo Tomi's force dynamic theory to support. Then after that, it made the diagram. So type 1 barrier removal. One type of deontic is a barrier removal. The other one is a force exertion. So the entire process is automated with this. So I think with this kind of AI, and we can do it faster. So we can finally make a complete repertoire for all the language points. Even if not all, most of the language points to be taught, as a language for English as a foreign language.
Yeah.
So
I mean, that should help teachers who don't know cognitive linguistics begin to understand how force dynamics works, and and is manifested through modals in a language like English. Yeah. But of course, force dynamics works not just for English modals. It works for all kinds of things, including Chinese ba and other, and Spanish, certain aspects in Spanish as well. So, yeah, that's what I like about cognitive linguistics, because it's one concept, like boundedness, for example, applies not just to verbs, but it also applies to mass nouns and count nouns, right? That's why it's such a powerful theory, I think.
Yes, we still have some questions left. I think we have to skip some, but let's move to a question that I personally very interested in. So the relationship between AI and the SCT theory. So here question, is this question? Here, no, the question number 9, number 10. So here, in your 2023 TESOL quarterly article with Xi, you argue that SCT terms are often invoked loosely in digital language learning research. At that time, the AI is just rising. At the end of 2022, the ChatGPT made its appearance. So, but now the generative AI tool have become much more powerful than 2023, and they have flooded into the language classroom. Do you see the same pattern repeating, or the situation is different now?
I think the problem is not on the technology side. I think the problem is on the SCT side. And our criticism was that the people who were trying to use SCT to inform technology didn't have the depth of knowledge in SCT. And that's part of the problem. And that extends beyond just the technology. There are a lot of people who are ostensibly doing SCT research, publishing papers, without the depth of knowledge of SCT. And the problem is then it becomes misleading to other people. So people have been misusing concepts from the theory that I think are, it's dangerous. And the work is getting published. But they're not, the problem is they're not reading the theory deeply enough. So I don't think the problem is on the AI side. I think the problem is on the SCT side. I think the two can work well together, but you have to understand the concepts of for example, what sociogenesis is all about. So one of the interesting questions is, if it's true that people are not really isolated individuals, but they are social beings, which means they're fundamentally tied to the social world, right? They're inseparable. Can AI represent that social world in a functional way that can promote development? Can AI be a replacement for a human individual? That's the question that has to be asked, right? But you have to understand that you have to look at models of how sociogenesis works, right? And so that means you have to look at the SCT research that's been done in psychology to show, like, for example, the work of Wolf Michael Roth on sociogenesis and how humans mediate the developmental process, and then ask yourself, can AI imitate this? Can AI do the same thing, right? But to ask AI to do the same thing, you have to understand what that thing is, how humans mediate each other, right? And so that's the problem that I see. It's not the AI side, it's the SCT side.
I think this problem exists not only in SCT, but also in other field of linguistics, because nowadays you see every paper in their title has an AI in it, in their title, AI-driven, AI-based. So, if you are an editor or if you are going to issue a publication guidelines or criteria that would help reviewers or editors distinguish between theoretically rigorous SCT-based AI research from superficial appropriation, what would that look like?
Yeah. That's been the problem with technology, no matter what the technology is, right? We've always, and the danger is that this is why we wrote this piece, that you distort the process because of the technology. So when you look at things like work in natural language processing, for example, in the computer world, the problem becomes that language is then understood on the basis of how computers can process language, or intelligence is understood on the basis of how computers and AI define intelligence. And that's the problem. So the object of study becomes constrained or defined by the limits of the technology. And that goes all the way back to the language labs back in the 60s when I was a language student, The language labs were supposed to solve all of our problems. They were supposed to replace, people, and you just sit there with your earphones on and you listen and repeat. And then they discovered, after they put the technology in place, that it wasn't working, right? So that's always been the case throughout the history of technological developments. And one of my colleagues who works in media studies has recently been investigating the whole enterprise of artificial intelligence. And I think he has an interesting take on it, which is we built the tool before we defined the problem that the tool could solve. And that's backwards, right? You have to first define the problem and then you build the tool. But because there was money to be made through AI, they went ahead and invested billions of dollars in AI, and now they're trying to convince people that it's, that we should be using it. And that would be like a carpenter making a saw before they decided what they were going to use the saw for. Nobody does that. That's weird, right? So, and Vygotsky made that very clear. You build a tool around the problem that you're trying to solve, right? So I think that's where we find ourselves in terms of AI now. There's a tool out there. Now we got to figure out how to use it. Whereas the way to do things would be to first, what's the problem? Then we build a tool.
So
and I think we did it backwards.
I have an observation that because of the the advancement of the technology, now people tend to care more about the product of language instead of the processing of language. And because it's easier to collect data for the first type of questions. So how do you think about this? What kind of, how big a problem it is?
That's a huge problem.
People don't do field work anymore. They just analyze texts.
Yes, that's a huge problem. I think because one of the things that Vygotsky's, the theory is interested in is not the outcome. It's not the product. It's the process that matters, right? And when you look at the old psychology research that was done in the 30s, 40s, and 50s by the Russians, following Vygotsky's theory, you can see that most of the studies are focused on the process, not on the method, but the process that people go through when they're trying to develop certain capacities, whether it be language, whether it be math, whatever the case may be. It was always the process that mattered. And whereas I think because of our fascination with methods, we are concerned about the outcome, the product, and not the process. And so I think what would be interesting for AI to do in terms of written would be not so much to study the finished written product, but how that product is generated. The drafts and the revisions. What do those look like? That's what has to be studied. When you write a research paper, right? You just don't write it from beginning to end. You revise and you revise and you revise. What does that process look like? That's your thinking. It's not the final product that's your thinking. It's the process that you go through as you're creating the final product that matters. And if we could get AI to trace that history, that development, that would be worth doing.
But I have also seen a counter argument of the about this. So people also argue that there is some value studying products, particularly when it comes with big data. So that's how digital humanities, the people now talking about digital social sciences. So they argue that we may identify some hidden patterns that we could not find before the AI era.
I don't disagree with that. I think the product and the patterns are important, but that's not the full story. The full story is where do those patterns come from? How are they produced? What's the process of producing a pattern? Right? That's, if you want to really understand cognition, that's what you have to look at, not the patterns in and of themselves, which are interesting. But I'm not saying that's useless. I'm saying that's only part of the picture.
I agree with you. So now let's move to the last category. The question will be a little more personal. I would ask you about your own experience academically and in terms of a life experience, and also ask you for some advice to graduate students in the field. So your own intellectual turning point came in 1983. That is the year when I was born. I was born in 1983. So when your colleague Bill Friday asked you about the ZPD during a doctoral exam, and that single encounter redirected your entire career towards Vygotsky. So for graduate students who are still searching for their theoretical home, what advice do you have about recognizing when a framework truly speaks to your question, as opposed to simply being fashionable? So because I just told you that I've been doing this program for 3 years now. This is the episode 286. I have been asked many times this question: which topic is hot today? Which topic is popular? Or which topic would be easier to publish? Numerous times. So this is also a question I really want to know the answer to.
Yeah, you're quite right. I mean that's a sad statement about the status of academic life. What are the hot topics? What can I publish on? Because most of academia now has adopted the business model. And the business model is about productivity. The more you produce, in a sense, the more surplus value you can produce, the more profit you have, right? And that's basically the model that most universities that I know of in any part of the world are following, right? And so that's why you have the grad students, the young scholars, are under tremendous pressure because universities are forcing them not to think, but to publish. And those are not necessarily the same thing, right? So what the question that Bill Frawley asked, and unfortunately Bill Frawley passed away a few years ago because of COVID. He was a student of Jim Wirch's at Northwestern University, and Wirch was studied with Leontiev. It floored me. It made me rethink completely everything I thought I knew about second language acquisition, right? This whole idea of, testing somebody for their future. It never occurred to me that you could do such a thing, right? And that's what got me rethinking all that I knew about second language acquisition. And then Frawley and I developed a seminar that we taught together on Vygotskian theory. And we were learning the theory along with the students. I mean, it was, but it wasn't fashionable at the time, that's for sure. We were going against the fashion of the time, that's for sure. We just kept at it and kept at it and kept at it because it was so attractive and so appealing. And so I think again, this goes to the whole issue of graduate programs not preparing students to be thinkers, and we prepare them to be fashionable. That's the problem. And we tell them what they should be working on. I mean, I can't tell you the number of students who have written to me from all over the world Asking me, what can we work on? What can I work on? And my response is, what are you interested in? Don't ask me to tell you what you should be studying. That's not my job, right? My job is to help you to learn how to think. And it's unfortunate that students have been. I know some students who have found SCT to be attractive, but their advisors tell them they shouldn't be working on SCT because, it's not fashionable anymore.
Sad.
So that's a real concern, and that goes back to what Wardhaus said. We work on a topic for a short period of time, and then we move on to something else that seems more attractive without solving any problems, right? We just haven't done that. And so I think my advice is somehow you have to learn how to think. And I think the best place to do that is in philosophy courses. I wish that we would require at least one course in philosophy of science as part of graduate education. I think that really would help people to learn how to think deeply about issues.
Yes.
But we don't. We require methods courses.
Yeah.
We don't require philosophy of science.
In this program, I have suggested several books to the audience, like Thomas Kuhn's The Scientific Revolution, The Structure of Scientific Revolution, Karl Popper's the Logic of Scientific Discovery. Those are really, really good book to begin with. And talking about the choice of the graduate students, because when you turned to Vygotsky, you were already established scholar in formal linguistics.
Yeah.
So, but you just mentioned that you were criticized. You questioned, or some of the researchers back then resisted your shift. So, how did you navigate that professionally? But for beginners.
Yeah. I was trained as a philologist, right? My original work was in Old Spanish phonology. That's where I started. And in a sense, I think that was a good thing for me in terms of my career, because I wasn't trained as a research psychologist. So I didn't have blinders on me. I wasn't made to think in one way and one way only. So when I came to applied linguistics and psychology, I came with a skeptical vision, skeptical perspective, right? And so that allowed me, I think, to think very differently and very openly about issues. And I wasn't within a particular silo, right? And so I think one of the things that students have to develop is to have a skepticism about what it is they're reading, what it is they're being told. A skeptical mind is a crucial aspect for any science. Now, skeptical, I don't mean dismissive. I mean, you have to be able to query whatever anybody says in a systematic, productive way, right? It's not that I just dismiss you out of hand. That's not skepticism. Skepticism is, all right, but what about this? What about that? Have you thought of it this way? Have you thought of it that way? Right? That's what a skeptical mind is all about. And again, we don't prepare students to think that way. We prepare them to be really good technicians. But I don't think we prepare them to be good thinkers.
To have a skepticism attitude, I think it may be particularly difficult for graduate students in China or in Southeast Asia, where the department's culture may strongly favor one particular frameworks. How realistic for them to follow one's own theoretical instinct?
I can't answer that. I mean, I can tell you it's not that different in the U.S. Setting. I think students are often criticized by their professors if they do think skeptically, if they do have questions about somebody's research, right? And they're sometimes criticized for that and dismissed for that way of thinking. How dare you challenge the professor, right? But what I was always willing to do was to invite my students to challenge me. That's the whole point of what we do. It's about challenging. The whole point of science is to challenge not the individual as a person, but to challenge the ideas that are being put out, right? And if you can't learn to do that, then it's really hard to do good science, it seems to me.
Your students are extremely lucky. I was very lucky. I have a very special doctoral years. I have 4 supervisors. So they all let me choose my own topic. They never interfere with the topic choosing. So I can choose whatever I'm interested in, and they try their best to supervise me.
Yeah.
But not everyone is so lucky, because so far as I know, many students, they have to do research in the topic specified by their supervisors.
Yeah, that's true.
And things would become extremely bad if they change supervisor in the middle of their doctoral study. They usually are required to change the topic too, because the new supervisor is working on a different topic. That's very, very frustrating. I changed the 4 supervisors, and no, this never happened to me. I am extremely lucky.
Yeah. I mean, that's true. I've had students, not everybody that I've worked with has to do SCT. Some of my students didn't want to do sociocultural theory. They wanted to do second language acquisition, but not sociocultural theory, and it was fine with me, and I helped them as much as I could. And
I hope all supervisors are like you. That would be a better world. So now it's 10 o'clock. We usually, our program is from 8:30 to 10. How about we still leave 5 minutes to the audience? They didn't ask any question while they are listening to us. Maybe they are absorbed in our conversation. So now we allocate like 5 minutes for the audience. So all the audience in the live stream, if you have any question, just type your question in the comment section. I'll read it out to Professor Lantolf. The program will continue until 10:05.
Okay.
If there's no other question, I have one more question. So it's this question has already been asked in the beginning. So the last question. So looking back at your career from formal linguistics and the Spanish syntax in the 1970s through the Vygotsky turn to the current work on digital learning, modality instruction, and the crisis commentary, is there anything you would do differently? And what questions in the field do you believe are still most urgently in need of an answer?
In the field of sociocultural theory or in the field of SLA?
SLA, in the field of SLA in general.
Yeah. Well, one of the things that I would do differently is I would learn Russian. Because some of Vygotsky's works have not been translated into English, and some of the translations have not been that accurate. And so I don't, and there have been things that have been translated into Spanish, which I read, which haven't been translated into English. But if I had to do it again, I would have learned Russian, for sure. But in terms of the field, I don't think any questions have been answered, to be honest with you. I think we don't have agreement on pretty much anything, other than, sort of superficial kinds of things that, people learn language through interaction. Okay. That you don't need to do research. Anybody on the street could tell you that. That's not that interesting a finding. So I think what's the relationship between theory and practice? That still hasn't been settled, right, within the field. Despite the fact that there's a whole area of instructed second language acquisition. But I just wonder how much that actually informs practice of teachers, right? I think the whole teacher education programs have to be revamped. I think they're not doing the job they should do, and that's part of the problem that we have. I think the whole issue of what language is hasn't been settled, right?
I completely agree with you. So I work with I work in EAP, the English for academic purposes. I do text analysis for EAP. I actually said similar things for my field. So many people ask me, some doctoral students, they find that everything in this field has already been studied. I always said, no, none of the important questions has been answered yet.
No.
None of them.
None of them. That's exactly right. One of the things that's of interest to me is this whole area of replication, right? Now, what is replication supposed to show? You don't just replicate studies for the sake of replicating them. When you look at the hard sciences, there are two really interesting differences in terms of how replication is done. The first one is that the person doing the original research replicates it him or herself in their own lab. So you never publish a finding based on one experiment. You rerun the experiment, and you rerun it, and you rerun it, and you rerun it. So there's an assumption on the part of the chemistry or physics or biology that the experiment has already been replicated to some extent. The second thing is you don't just replicate any study, you replicate studies that produce astounding findings that are not anticipated by the field. So if you remember many years ago, there was this study that came out of physics on producing cold fusion, right? Where you could produce a nuclear reaction at room temperature, basically, which would be a tremendous
by Korean a group of Korean people, and which turned out to be a lie.
It was not true, right? But that was replicated, right? That study, the way they because that was astounding, because that should not have happened, right? The prediction is that should never happen. So that was a study worth replicating, right? And it turned out to be wrong. On the other hand, there was studies done on superconductivity, right? Which showed that if you use certain elements, you can you don't lose any energy, right? If you insert certain elements into the system, you don't lose energy when you're creating electricity. That would be a boon for things like building MRI machines and CAT scans and all this other stuff. That was a surprising finding, because up until that point, they never could produce electricity at low temperatures that wouldn't waste energy. Well, they found a way of doing that, and that was a stunning finding. They replicated it, and that turned out to be true. So that was a positive thing for replication.
There's an interesting question coming from the audience.
Yes.
Someone asked, does mediation equal to regulation? As two concepts from the SAT.
Yeah, I mean, mediation is a kind of regulation by somebody else or yourself. You can mediate yourself, right? That's one of the reasons why we engage in private speech, right? That's a way of regulating our thinking or mediating our thinking. Right. So we can be regulated by different objects or by other people, by artifacts, by our language, and so on, right? But we do that to regulate ourselves, to control ourselves, right? It's becomes voluntary. That's the whole point, is that you control your own mind, your mind doesn't control you. And that's what children have to learn how to do, and that's done through the regulation produced by other people.
One of the audience asked, what is a top tip for early career researcher? Top tip. Top 3 tips, maybe.
The top tip to me is to learn to think skeptically and to ask really good questions. There's no such thing as a bad question, right? The harder the question, the better, right? And don't be afraid to ask those questions. We might not be able to answer them right away, but that doesn't matter. It's the hard questions that drive science forward.
Yes, I'm totally with you. So if there's no more question from the audience, and let's call it a day. And thank you again. Thank you so much, Professor Lantolf. Thank you for joining us, and thank you for this wonderful conversation. And we hope to see you soon again in this live stream because there are so many other questions we have not asked yet. And if you have any other projects that need help from me and from the group, the members of this reading group, just drop an email and I'll do my best to contribute.
Okay, thank you very much. I enjoyed it very much, and I'm really interested in the work you're doing on the ZPD and on dynamic assessment and on mediation using AI. So I would like to keep up on that work too. So thank you very much for letting me know about that work. Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
No problem.
Thank you.
Thank you
everyone.
for the audience, and thank you again. And we'll see you again in next Tuesday.
Okay, everybody. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.